Sometimes people look back on the 1918 flu epidemic and say, well, things got a little crazy then, but everything went back to normal and we were fine. And the same thing will happen now. But we were not fine back then. Things were crazy, and it wasn't quite exactly the same. Now, let me just start with this. Here's a little list of some certain events, okay? Now, the flu epidemic, of course, that was 1918 and 1919, but we're going to skip back to this for this time period because for 6 or 7 years, things were really going pretty badly for the U.S. First of all, Federal Reserve Act of 1913, that established a central bank. We've been suffering from it ever since with inflation and the fiat currency. Started out not completely a fiat currency, I understand that, but that's where it began. Income tax, unconstitutional. Started out with just, we'll just have a small amount on people earning over $50,000 and that'll be it. We just need a little bit more money, and we see where that's gone. 17th Amendment, if you forget what that is, that was when they said you could vote directly for your state senators or for your for Senate candidates to go to Washington. Whereas before, those were actually sent to Washington by the legislatures of each state. So whether you agree with that or not, that took power away from the states and put it toward the federal government because the focus was on the federal government. So if you wanted a good senator going to Washington before, you would have to go to your state legislators and say, okay, do something about that and be involved at the local level. So that de-emphasized that. World War I, of course, that's when we entered World War I, 1917. And that went along with a gigantic propaganda campaign. This whole time period was about making everybody do the same thing, making everything national. And that was a good example of it. I think certainly the founders would have been shocked to see that at this time we'd be putting all this legislation into effect and sending people across to Europe to fight in their wars. Anyway, the flu and the reaction to the flu, most importantly of all, the reaction to it, which is really what was most important with the COVID-19 pandemic, was a big problem. And then we get prohibition, and some people are more up in arms about that, but it was another thing where they were using a constitutional amendment to really pass a law, and that's crazy. It was a stupid idea. It did actually work. People usually, the next thing they say is, and it didn't work. It actually achieved all of its goals. It achieved them in a very authoritarian manner, but it lowered disease. It did everything that it actually set out to do. It was just a bad idea, and it had a lot of bad, unforeseen consequences, and it's a good thing it's gone. But anyway, just as a reminder, of course, Woodrow Wilson was elected in 1913. I don't want to blame everything on him, of course, but he's certainly become one of the most unpopular presidents and seen as one of the most authoritarian. And I think the evidence for that time period is right here. So, and he sent soldiers in packed boats off to Europe, knowing that many of them would die of the flu, saying, well, that's just the price we have to pay. So there was a devaluation of human life at that point. So a lot was going wrong in the U.S. at that time, a lot. I want to talk mostly about the flu, and you can see with that ridiculous picture on the thumbnail of people playing football wearing face masks, completely silly. And I know this has become one of the more boring topics because it's been talked to death, but I guarantee you're going to find some stuff out today that you've never seen before. Anyway, just getting to the reaction. I've got this highlighted, but this is where it came from. This article here, mask resistance during pandemic isn't new. In 19, many Americans were slackers. Okay, notice the derogatory term for that. Here's the part I wanted to show. Nationwide, posters presented mask wearing as a civic duty. Social responsibility had been embedded into the social fabric by a massive wartime federal propaganda campaign launched in early 1917 when the U.S. entered the Great War. So this went along with this whole nationalistic, propagandistic idea. And there was definitely this feeling at that time that if people are too stupid to make decisions for themselves, you need to propagandize them. And look what it got us. Other than a huge war, it got us a reaction that was really inappropriate for a country that is freedom-loving like ours. Here's another article. All these links will be in the description, by the way. This is from the Washington Post. I don't trust the Washington Post. I don't expect you to either. But here's a part where you've got Eugene Calley. He was arrested for not wearing his mask. Anyway, listen to this. "This is only the beginning," said the chief of police, according to the Oakland Tribune. "We are going to enforce this mask ordinance if we have to pack the city jail with people. This epidemic is too serious to be taken as a joke, and men arrested will find that it's no laughing matter when they face the police judges." Well, isn't it typical that as soon as somebody gets a little bit of power and they think they have a little bit of moral authority, all of a sudden they're willing to do just about anything to their fellow man, including packing them into jails. Now, if there's a flu, packing somebody into jails with other people that closely is not a great idea, just for not wearing a mask. I mean, come on. They couldn't just fine them, and I know there's a lot of talk about what the fines were then and how they were enforced and everything. But just listen to the tone of that person. And we saw a lot of that during the pandemic this time around, but in a way worse, because people were setting up those big camps. Remember that? Where in Canada and elsewhere, in Australia, and they were talking about it here, I know, and all these things where it's like, well, if people are too stupid to do this, we're just going to lock them all up. We'll take their business away, we'll take their money away, we'll take their jobs away, we'll do whatever we have to make them comply. And these are the same people that probably 6 months before would have been really delightful, nice people. But as soon as people have that fire in their belly, they think they have a little bit of power, they exercise it, and they ramp up to some really incredibly bad things very, very quickly. Now, the next question is, did they really know what they were doing at the time? And there's not as much as we did now. The 1918 pandemic mistake that changed medicine forever, this basically talks about how they didn't really know where the flu came from, and they thought it might be from a bacterium. And in that case, you actually would be able to affect it with a face mask. And they thought, well, maybe we'll get splatter from getting on other people if we wear masks. And but people were just guessing, and it was mostly just, well, we can't think of anything else to do really other than keep away from others. And people have to go out in public sometimes, so might as well wear a mask. And people took that and ran with it. And same thing happened in our little pandemic this time around. That's what this article is about, and it's a good article. I think I think there's a lot to be learned there. But even more interesting is stuff like this, because we're not sure whether people actually died of the flu. And here's a good one, and I bet you haven't heard this one before. I'm going to go to this one first. Aspirin contributed to mortalities of the 1918 Spanish influenza and more. They're saying contributed, and I think that's the kind of word you use when you're not really sure exactly, but there's a lot to be said about this theory, because autopsy reports from 1918 are consistent with what we know today about the dangers of aspirin toxicity, as well as the expected viral causes of death. Now, I know you're still thinking you must be stupid. Aspirin doesn't kill you. In 1918, physicians did not fully understand either the dosing or pharmacology of aspirin, yet were willing to recommend, and not here in other articles, and it talks about it a little bit farther down, how much they were giving to people. They thought basically the more aspirin, the better. It's a little bit of a wonder drug. So sometimes they were giving people 400, 800 times the dose that they should be giving them. One thing that can do is cause you to have respiratory distress. And it can also have another bunch of symptoms that don't match flu. And what they find is that the people who were dying of the flu had those symptoms. So there was a flu, it was a bad flu, but was anybody really dying of it? Or were that many people really dying of it? Or was it really giving too much aspirin? Now, to continue, it says its use was promoted by the drug industry. Oh, well, I'll be damned, you know? It was promoted by the drug industry. Gee, what was like that? What was just like that? Endorsed by doctors, oh, sure, wanting to do something, quote unquote, basically because they were guessing, and accepted by families and institutions desperate for hope. Of course, my channel right now will immediately be canceled, probably. I don't know. It's destined not to last. Please watch it on Rumble. Not just that, okay, but there's more. There's more. Aspirin misuse may have made 1918 flu pandemic worse. I just wanted that one in there, just a little bit more corroboration. But look at this. Evidence from the remains of 1918 flu pandemic victims contradicts long-held belief that healthy young adults were particularly vulnerable. So were they just saying that or not? Anyway, it says that we didn't know what was going on. However, for COVID, we did know what was going on. We knew that the masks did not work in 1918. We knew that it was a virus. We knew that they were not going to do anything. And yet everybody was out there, Dr. Fauci, leading the charge to wear masks. So that was part of the authoritarian strain that started around this time. I mean, there's been plenty of other stuff. You go back to the Civil War, I understand all that, but here it is, just building, and it's actually, in my view, gotten worse, and it was worse during COVID because they were knowingly doing things that they knew were wrong. Recommending things that they knew were wrong and doing them anyway. So that's basically what I wanted to say today. But I just coming back to this, I want to just get back to the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 because I think it's something that we should all know about. We've all heard about the central bank and it's bad and fiat currency and all this sort of stuff. But reading The Creature from Jekyll Island is so important. It's about the Federal Reserve, how it was founded, how fraudulent it was, how they knew it was fraudulent, how they knew it was just there to fleece the American people, how they got it in basically without people really noticing. They should have. People weren't really paying attention. A lot of people were yelling and screaming about it, but they were ignored. So you can see this right here, Creature from Jekyll Island. This is on YouTube, okay? See that? YouTube? Because I know some people are like, if I can't find it on YouTube, I'm not watching it. This is the audiobook, and I want to play the first part of it because if you do go to it and then you go and you listen to the first section, you're going to be like, nope, not listening to a robot voice. It's not a robot voice. It just starts that way. Listen.
The Audioboy Project. A decentralized anti-authority.
Patience, because once you get a little farther in...
The previous estimate that 1/4 of the world's wealth was represented by these groups.
It's the short one, and it's actually all you really need to truly understand what the person's saying about Federal Reserves in the U.S. and really around the world. The rest of the book, altogether, it's a 23-hour recording. The rest of the book is about stuff like the WEF, the WHO, all kinds of stuff like that. You might be interested in it after watching the first part, but anyway, this is available to you for free, okay? It's on YouTube. There's no way you can just say, well, I don't know, it's too hard. You don't have to pay for it at all. Now, notice Audioboy on Odyssey. This is where he puts the entire book. He says he is no longer posting on YouTube. Some people are not doing that. You're missing a lot of stuff if you don't go to the alternative places. Some people are just so insistent, like, have you seen that? It sucks. It's not like YouTube. YouTube's so much better. Well, you're not going to find a lot of things if you don't take the step to just put one leg into the alternative ones like Odyssey, Rumble, BitChute. Just have them for certain things, and hopefully they'll build up because they allow a lot more freedom. So this is what you see if you go to Odyssey. I put the link to this exact thing in because he's got a lot of books on here. Also, Internet Archive, okay? You can even read it on the Internet Archive, and there's more. You can read it like this if you want, or you can go down, and it just takes a little bit of learning. You can get the full PDF. You can get the EPUB version, so you can read it on your Kindle. There are a lot of other ways that you can actually download the full text of this book. So I just wanted to make that available to you so that's nice and convenient. And I've got one bonus fact for you about masks. Even now, they aren't so sure if surgeons wearing masks is a good idea. Because this is kind of the fallback position a lot. Well, why do they wear it in hospitals if they don't do any good? Well, they don't really know if they do any good. They kind of might, maybe, sort of, a little bit. If you read this article, you'll see why. There's no strong evidence for it. And the only reason we still do it is because they started, and it's like, well, now that you're doing it, you might as well keep doing it because it might do something, possibly. If we said stop wearing them, there'd be sort of a backlash, so why rock the boat kind of thing. That's all that's really going on. So thank you for listening, and let's try to do something about this.
Мне бы хотелось еще чашечку. И мне. И мне.